Coming up on 5 Minute News. Southern Baptist leaders stonewalled sex abuse victims. Biden has £78,000 of infant formula delivered to US. And UN says 100 million people forcibly displaced across the world. It's Monday, May 23. I'm Anthony Davis. The leaders of America's largest Protestant denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, stonewalled and denigrated survivors of clergy sex abuse over almost 2 decades, while seeking to protect their own reputations, according to a scathing 288-page investigative report issued yesterday. These survivors and other concerned Southern Baptists repeatedly shared allegations with the SBC's executive committee, only to be met time and time again with resistance, stonewalling, and even outright hostility from some within the EC, said the report. The 7-month investigation was conducted by Guidepost Solutions, an independent firm contracted by the executive committee after delegates to last year's national meeting pressed for a probe by outsiders. Our investigation revealed that for many years, a few senior EC leaders, along with outside counsel, largely controlled the EC's response to these reports of abuse and was singularly focused on avoiding liability for the SBC, the report said. In service of this goal, survivors and others who reported abuse were ignored, disbelieved, or met with a constant refrain that the SBC could take no action due to its policy regarding church autonomy, even if it meant that convicted molesters continued in ministry with no notice or warning to their current church or congregation, the report added. The report asserts that an executive committee staffer maintained a list of Baptist ministers accused of abuse, but there is no indication that anyone took any action to ensure that the accused ministers were no longer in positions of power at SBC churches. The most recent list includes the names of hundreds of abusers thought to be affiliated at some point with the SBC. Survivors and advocates have long called for a public database of abusers. A military aircraft carrying enough specialty infant formula for more than 500,000 baby bottles arrived on Sunday in Indianapolis, the first of several flights expected from Europe aimed at relieving a shortage that has sent parents scrambling to find enough to feed their children. President Joe Biden authorized the use of Air Force planes for the effort, dubbed Operation Fly Formula, because no commercial flights were available. The formula weighed 78,000 pounds, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters aboard Air Force One as Biden flew from South Korea to Japan. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack was in Indianapolis to greet the arrival of the first shipment. The flights are intended to provide some incremental relief in the coming days as the government works on a more lasting response to the shortage, Brian Dees, director of the White House National Economic Council, said on Sunday. Later, the White House announced the first 2 Defense Production Act authorizations for infant formula, both coming from the Department of Health and Human Services. The manufacturer, Abbott Nutrition, can now receive priority orders of raw materials, like sugar and corn syrup for infant formula, which the White House said will allow the manufacturer to increase production quickly by 1/3. Reckitt, owner of Mead Johnson, can now receive priority orders of consumables like filters and other single-use products necessary to generate certain oils needed to produce infant formula, the White House said, which will allow Reckitt facilities to operate at maximum capacity. The crisis follows the closure of the nation's largest domestic manufacturing plant in Michigan in February due to safety issues. More than 100 million people have been driven from their homes around the world, the UN Refugee Agency said today, citing new data about those escaping violence, conflict, persecution, and human rights violations. The war in Ukraine has been one of the factors propelling millions of people to flee, the UNHCR said, adding that protracted conflict in places like Ethiopia and Democratic Republic of Congo were other factors behind the high numbers. The UNHCR data includes refugees, asylum seekers, and those displaced within their own countries. Last week, a humanitarian body said those displaced within their own countries had reached a record of close to 60 million people by the end of last year. The UN agency urged action to address the causes of displacement, saying humanitarian aid was only treating the consequences. In total, 59.1 million people were living in displaced conditions at the end of last year, compared with 55 million people in 2020, the annual report showed. The countries with the highest numbers of displaced people were Syria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Colombia, Afghanistan, and Yemen. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.